I was reviewing depositions at my desk when my phone buzzed with a text from Mom. "Hey, honey. Just for your information, you can watch Candace's wedding online this Saturday. We'll send you the link. Love you." I stared at the screen, my coffee mug frozen halfway to my lips. My hands started shaking as the words sank in. Watch online? My own sister's wedding? Ashley, my paralegal colleague, noticed my expression from across our corporate law office. "What's wrong, Beulah? You look like you've seen a ghost." I turned my phone toward her, unable to speak. Ashley's eyes widened in horror. "Wait, you're not invited to your sister's wedding? That's not normal." "Honey, that's really not normal." My fingers trembled as I dialed Mom's number, stepping into the empty conference room for privacy. She answered on the second ring, her voice cheerful and oblivious. "Oh, Beulah, did you get my text about the wedding link? Isn't technology wonderful these days?" "Mom, what do you mean watch online? Why am I not invited to Candace's wedding?" There was a pause, then her tone shifted to that familiar dismissive cadence I knew too well. "Well, it's a small ceremony, dear. Candace wanted to keep it intimate, just close family and friends." I pulled up Candace's Instagram on my phone, scrolling through her posts from the past month. Venue photos showing tables for at least 150 guests. Posts about her bachelorette party with 12 bridesmaids. Stories about the rehearsal dinner for 60 people. "Mom, her Instagram shows a huge wedding. How is this intimate?" "Instagram isn't real life, honey. You know how Candace exaggerates." But I knew this wasn't about venue size. This was about a pattern I'd spent 28 years trying to ignore. Growing up, Candace's birthday parties were elaborate affairs with themes, decorations, and guest lists that filled our backyard. Mine were quiet family dinners where Dad would inevitably take work calls halfway through. When Candace graduated high school, they threw her a party with a DJ and catered food. When I graduated summa cum laude from college, they sent a card. The financial dynamics had always been crystal clear. Mom and Dad funded Candace's art school education while I worked 3 jobs to pay for my own degree. They bankrolled her failed pottery business, her unsuccessful photography venture, and now apparently a wedding that cost more than my annual salary. Meanwhile, I'd built my career as a senior paralegal entirely on my own merit, never asking them for a dime. This isn't about intimacy, Mom. This is about the same pattern it's always been. Candace gets everything, and I get the leftovers. That's not fair, Beulah. You're being dramatic. Dramatic. The word that had followed me through childhood whenever I questioned why my achievements went unnoticed while Candace's smallest efforts were celebrated like Olympic victories. When I made partner track at the firm, they said I was lucky. When Candace sold a single painting for $50, they framed the newspaper clipping. "Did you even know I got promoted to senior paralegal last month?" Or that Marcus and I are talking about buying a house? Silence. Then, well, you never tell us anything about your life. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. I stopped telling you things because you never seemed interested. Unless it involved helping Candace somehow. My mind flashed to countless family gatherings where conversations revolved around Candace's latest crisis or triumph. Extended family members would ask about my career, my relationship, my life, but before I could answer, Mom would redirect attention to whatever drama Candace was navigating. I'd learned to fade into the background, to be the reliable one, the low-maintenance daughter who wouldn't demand attention or create problems. "Your sister needs more support than you do, Beulah. You've always been so independent." There it was, the justification I'd heard my entire life. Independence wasn't a strength in our family. It was permission to be ignored. Being independent doesn't mean I don't deserve to be included in major family events. The link will be lovely. You'll still be part of the day. Part of the day. Like a distant observer watching someone else's life through a screen while sitting alone in my apartment. The metaphor was too perfect. Too painful. After work, I drove straight to Candace's downtown apartment, the one Mom and Dad helped her afford despite her inconsistent income. She opened the door wearing yoga clothes and a face mask, looking surprised but not particularly guilty. Beulah, what brings you by? I was just doing some pre-wedding self-care. We need to talk about Saturday. Her expression shifted, becoming guarded. Oh, you mean the online thing? I was going to call you about that. Isn't it great how we can include everyone these days? Cut the act, Candace. Why am I watching your wedding online instead of being there? She gestured for me to come in, but her movements were stiff, theatrical. The apartment was filled with wedding gifts, dress bags, and flower arrangements. Evidence of a celebration I was excluded from. Look, Beulah, it's not personal. We just had to make some tough choices about the guest list. Not personal? I'm your sister. I'm your only sister. She sat on her expensive couch, the one our parents bought her last Christmas, and arranged her face mask perfectly before responding. You have to understand. This day is about me and Tyler. We wanted people there who would really celebrate with us, who wouldn't bring any negative energy. Negative energy? What negative energy have I ever brought to your life? Candace's composure cracked slightly. You want the truth? Fine. You make everything about you, Beulah. Your perfect career, your perfect boyfriend Marcus, your perfect organized life. Every family gathering turns into the Beulah show somehow. I stared at her, genuinely confused. The Beulah show? I barely speak at family gatherings. Exactly. You sit there all quiet and superior, like you're too good for the rest of us. And then people ask about your job or your relationship. And suddenly, everyone's comparing us. It's my wedding day, and I don't want to deal with that. The accusation was so far from reality that I felt dizzy. Candace, I've spent years stepping back to give you space. I've never competed with you for anything. That's what makes it worse. You don't even try, and you still end up looking better. Do you know how exhausting it is to be compared to someone who has everything figured out? Her voice was rising now, tears mixing with the clay mask on her cheeks. This wasn't about the wedding. This was about years of resentment I never knew existed. I don't have everything figured out. I work hard for what I have. Right, perfect Beulah, working hard while I'm just the family disappointment who can't get her life together. I never said that. I never thought that. You didn't have to say it. It's written all over your face every time you look at my life. My failed businesses, my student loans, my inability to be as successful as you. I sat down across from her, trying to process this revelation. Candace, I've always been proud of you. You're creative and brave enough to pursue your dreams. I've never judged your choices, but you've never needed anyone, have you? Never needed help, never needed rescue, never needed the family to rally around you, and that makes the rest of us feel useless. The conversation was spiraling into territory I hadn't expected. This wasn't about guest lists or venue capacity. This was about fundamental resentment that had been building for years. So excluding me from your wedding is supposed to solve that? If you really loved me, you'd understand why I need this day to be about me. Just once, I need to be the center of attention, without worrying about being compared to you. I would never steal attention from your wedding. Just by existing there, you would. People would see you with Marcus looking all perfect, and they'd wonder why I'm marrying Tyler when you found someone so much better. They'd ask about your job and make comments about how proud Mom and Dad must be of your success. I realized then that no amount of reasoning would change her mind. She had created a narrative where my mere presence was a threat to her happiness. So, you want me to watch your wedding online? I want you to support me by understanding that sometimes love means stepping back. The manipulation was breathtaking in its audacity. She was asking me to collude in my own exclusion and frame it as an act of love. And if I don't agree to this? Her face hardened. Then you'll ruin this for me. And Mom and Dad will never forgive you for causing drama during the most important day of my life. I stood up, clarity washing over me like cold water. I won't be watching online, Candace. What do you mean? I mean, if I'm not welcome at your wedding, I'm not participating at all. I won't be your virtual audience member. Her mouth dropped open. You can't be serious. I am. If my presence is so threatening that you can't include me in person, then my virtual presence isn't welcome either. Beulah, don't be ridiculous. Just watch the link and be happy for me. I am happy for you. But I'm not going to pretend this is normal or acceptable. I walked toward the door, feeling lighter than I had in years. Don't you dare ruin this for me, she called after me. I'm not ruining anything. I'm just not participating in my own humiliation. The drive home was surreal. For the first time in my adult life, I had chosen self-respect over family peace. Marcus was cooking dinner when I arrived, and one look at my face told him everything. How did it go? I'm officially not watching the wedding online. He turned off the stove and pulled me into a hug. Good for you. She thinks I'm ruining her day. You're not responsible for managing other people's emotions, especially when they're asking you to diminish yourself. That night, we talked for hours about family dynamics, boundaries, and the difference between love and enabling. Marcus helped me see what I'd been too close to recognize. I'd been protecting people who weren't protecting me. My phone rang at 6 a.m. Dad's number flashed on the screen, and I knew immediately that Candace had called in reinforcements. Beulah, what is this nonsense your sister is telling me about you refusing to watch her wedding? His voice was sharp with the authority he'd used throughout my childhood to shut down conversations he didn't want to have. Good morning, Dad. I've decided not to participate in the wedding at all. How can you be so selfish? This is your sister's special day. Selfish. The word landed like a familiar slap. Growing up, any assertion of my needs or feelings was labeled selfish, while Candace's demands for attention and resources were simply meeting her needs. Selfish would be disrupting the wedding. I'm removing myself entirely to avoid any drama. You're creating drama by making this about you. The irony was staggering. By choosing not to participate, I was somehow making it about me. But when Candace explicitly excluded me to avoid comparison, that was just protecting her special day. I'm not making it about me, Dad. I'm accepting that it's not about me at all. Don't you dare start that psychological nonsense with me. Your mother and I raised you better than this. The call waiting beep interrupted his lecture. Mom's number appeared on the screen. Dad, Mom's calling. Can we talk about this later? You better fix this, Beulah. Your mother is beside herself. I switched to Mom's call, bracing myself for the emotional manipulation that was surely coming. Beulah, honey, I'm so upset about this misunderstanding with your sister. Her voice was shaky with tears, the same tone she'd used when I was 8 and refused to give Candace my birthday money to buy a toy she wanted. It's not a misunderstanding, Mom. Of course it is. Candace loves you so much, and she just wanted to include everyone safely. The online option is actually very thoughtful. Thoughtful would have been inviting me in person. But honey, they have budget constraints. Wedding venues are so expensive. This was rich, considering they'd paid for the entire $50,000 celebration, but pointing out the financial reality would only lead to more deflection. This isn't about money, Mom. Then what is it about? Help me understand why you're doing this to our family. Doing this to our family. Not having it done to me, but doing it to them. The victim and perpetrator roles had been neatly reversed, as always. I'm protecting myself from being treated like a second-class family member. That's ridiculous. You've never been treated that way. Three-way calling beeped in. Now I was getting the full-court press. Girls, I have your father on the line. Let's resolve this as a family. Dad's voice came through clearly. Beulah, your mother and I have discussed this, and we think you're being unreasonable. Have you discussed why Candace didn't invite me in the first place? She explained that to us, Mom said quickly. It's a small, intimate ceremony with 150 guests. Where are you getting that number? Dad demanded. Instagram. Facebook. The wedding website that lists the entire wedding party and reception details. Silence. They hadn't expected me to fact-check their story. Regardless of the guest count, Dad finally said, "This is what Candace wanted for her day, and we support her decision. You support her decision to exclude me. We support our daughter's right to plan her own wedding," Mom said, her voice gaining strength as she found solid ground. and we're disappointed that you can't put aside your feelings to support your sister. My feelings about being excluded from major family events? Your feelings about not being the center of attention, Dad said bluntly. The accusation hung in the air like smoke. This was their truth. That my hurt over exclusion was actually narcissism in disguise. When have I ever demanded to be the center of attention? This conversation is a perfect example, Dad said. Instead of celebrating your sister, you're making everything about your hurt feelings. The gaslighting was masterful. By objecting to mistreatment, I was proving that I deserved mistreatment. I'm going to let you both go, I said calmly. Beulah, wait, Mom said quickly. We need to resolve this before Saturday. There's nothing to resolve. I won't be participating. If you don't support your sister. Dad's voice was cold now. Then maybe you don't need to be part of this family at all. The threat was meant to scare me into compliance. Instead, it clarified everything. Maybe you're right, I said, and hung up. Within an hour, my phone was buzzing with calls from extended family. Aunt Patricia called first, her voice concerned but clearly having received a very specific version of events. Beulah, sweetie. Your mother called me in tears. She said you're refusing to attend Candace's wedding over some misunderstanding? I wasn't invited to attend, Aunt Patricia. I was told to watch online. Oh. Long pause. That seems unusual. It is unusual. But surely there's some explanation. Maybe budget constraints? Or venue limitations? Everyone was so eager to find an innocent explanation, to avoid acknowledging what was right in front of them. The explanation is that Candace didn't want me there, and Mom and Dad support that decision. But honey, families work through these things. Maybe if you talk to them again. Uncle Jim called an hour later with a completely different energy. Beulah, I just talked to your father, and I have to say, I'm pretty disgusted by this whole situation. His blunt support caught me off guard. You are? Excluding your own daughter from a family wedding? That's not right, kiddo. Your grandmother is spinning in her grave. Dad says I'm being selfish. Your dad's been enabling Candace's bad behavior for years. And now he's surprised it's bitten him in the rear end. You're the most level-headed person in that family. And if you're upset enough to step back, then something is seriously wrong. Uncle Jim's validation meant everything. He'd known our family dynamics from the outside, had seen patterns I'd been too close to recognize. What should I do? Whatever protects your peace of mind. Life's too short to spend it begging people to treat you decently. That afternoon brought more calls. Cousins, family, friends, even Tyler's mother called to express confusion about my absence. Each conversation revealed how my parents had spun the story. Beulah was causing drama over wedding planning details. Beulah was jealous of Candace's happiness. Beulah was being unreasonably demanding, but a few people saw through the narrative. Cousin Sarah admitted she'd noticed the favoritism for years, but hadn't felt comfortable saying anything. Tyler's mother mentioned that Tyler had specifically asked about inviting me, but Candace had refused. By evening, I was emotionally drained but also strangely energized. For the first time, I was seeing our family dynamics clearly, and other people were seeing them too. The truth was coming out despite my parents' careful spin control. Marcus found me researching family scapegoat dynamics online, reading articles about golden child syndrome and emotional manipulation. Finding anything helpful? Everything I'm reading describes our family perfectly. I think I've been the family scapegoat my whole life without realizing it. What does that mean for you going forward? It means Saturday is going to be very interesting. Saturday morning, Marcus and I drove 2 hours north to a hiking trail we'd been wanting to explore. I deliberately left my phone in the car, determined to spend the day focused on anything except my sister's wedding. The mountain air was crisp, the autumn leaves were spectacular, and for several hours, I forgot about family drama entirely. We returned to the parking lot around 4 in the afternoon, tired but peaceful. When I turned my phone back on, the screen exploded with notifications. 17 missed calls, 32 text messages, and 6 voicemails. My stomach dropped as I scrolled through the senders. Mom, Dad, Candace, Uncle Jim, Aunt Patricia. and several numbers I didn't recognize. Marcus, something's wrong. The first voicemail was from Mom, her voice shrill with panic. Beulah, call me immediately. There's been a terrible misunderstanding at the wedding. The second was from Dad. Your sister needs you. Whatever happened between you two? She needs family right now. But the third voicemail changed everything. It was from Jessica, Candace's maid of honor, and her voice was shaking. Beulah, I need to tell you something that happened at the rehearsal dinner last night. Candace had way too much to drink and said some things about you that Tyler overheard. I think you should know what's really been going on. I called Jessica immediately, my hands trembling as I dialed. Jessica. It's Beulah. What happened? Oh God, I'm so glad you called. Beulah, I owe you a huge apology. We all do. What are you talking about? Last night at the rehearsal dinner, Candace got completely wasted during the toasts. She started talking about how relieved she was that you weren't coming to the wedding, and then she began bragging about things she'd done over the years. My blood ran cold. What kind of things? She told us about calling your college boyfriend Kevin senior year and telling him you were cheating on him with your study group partner. She thought it was hilarious that he broke up with you right before graduation. I sat down heavily on a park bench. Kevin had dumped me out of nowhere, claiming he'd heard rumors about my faithfulness. I'd been devastated and confused, never understanding where those rumors had come from. There's more, Jessica continued, her voice filled with shame. She bragged about sabotaging your job application at Hartwell and Associates 2 years ago. She called their HR department pretending to be a reference from your current firm and gave you a terrible review. The Hartwell position. My dream job that I'd been perfectly qualified for, but they'd withdrawn their offer after checking references. My current firm's HR had no record of anyone calling about me, and I'd never understood what went wrong. She's been doing this for years, Beulah. Sharing your personal information with family members to make you look bad, undermining your relationships, interfering with your opportunities. She was drunk and bragging about being the smarter sister who knew how to protect herself from competition. Who else heard this? The entire wedding party. Tyler's groomsmen, all the bridesmaids, Tyler's parents. Everyone was horrified. But Tyler was furious. His best man, Jake, actually dated your friend Morgan a few years ago and knew the truth about some of the lies Candace had spread. What happened today? Tyler confronted her this morning before the ceremony. He demanded to know if what she'd said was true, and she tried to backtrack and claim she was just drunk and joking. But Jake had already talked to him about the other stuff, and Tyler realized he was marrying someone who'd been systematically destroying her own sister's life. I closed my eyes, absorbing the magnitude of what I was hearing. He called off the wedding? Right at the altar, in front of everyone. He said he couldn't marry someone capable of that level of cruelty and deception. Candace had a complete breakdown, screaming that it was all your fault somehow, that you'd ruined her wedding even though you weren't there. Where is she now? Your parents took her home. But Beulah, there's something else. When Tyler was explaining why he was calling off the wedding, he mentioned that he'd specifically asked Candace about inviting you, and she'd told him you two weren't close anymore because you disapproved of him. Another lie. I'd never even met Tyler. She told him you thought he wasn't good enough for her, and that you'd cause drama if you came. Tyler was actually hurt that you didn't approve of him. And now he realizes it was all manipulation. How did my parents react when the truth came out? They were humiliated. Everyone at that wedding now knows exactly how your family has been treating you. Uncle Jim stood up during Tyler's explanation and said he was proud of Tyler for having integrity and that the family owed you a massive apology. I was crying now, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of vindication, of relief, of finally being seen. Jessica, why are you telling me this? Because I've known you since high school, and I've always wondered why you seemed so distant from your family. Now I know it's because they've been gaslighting you for years while your sister actively sabotaged your life. I feel sick that I didn't speak up sooner. You didn't know. I should have asked more questions. We all should have. The way they talked about you at family events never sat right with me, but I told myself it wasn't my business. What happens now? Tyler wanted me to call you personally, to apologize for not including you in the wedding planning. He said he would have insisted on inviting you if he'd known the truth. He's actually hoping to meet you sometime, to apologize in person for believing her lies. After hanging up with Jessica, I sat in stunned silence while Marcus rubbed my back. 28 years of confusion suddenly made sense. The mysterious relationship problems, the lost opportunities, the family dynamics that never quite added up. It hadn't been bad luck or my own failings. It had been systematic sabotage by someone I'd spent my life trying to love and support. My phone rang again. This time it was Uncle Jim. Beulah, please tell me you're somewhere safe and surrounded by people who love you. I'm with Marcus. We're heading home now. Good. I want you to know that everything came out today, and I've never been more ashamed of my brother and sister-in-law in my life. Jessica told me what happened. Then you know that your instinct to stay away was absolutely right. If you'd been there today, Candace would have found a way to blame you for the whole disaster. Dad threatened to cut me off if I didn't support Candace. Your father is panicking because his golden child's behavior just got exposed in front of the entire extended family. He's going to try to blame you somehow. But everyone who was there knows the truth now. What should I do when they call? Whatever you want to do. You don't owe them anything, kiddo. You've been the family scapegoat for too long, and it's time for that to end. As we drove home, my phone continued buzzing with calls I didn't answer. I felt like I was seeing my entire life through a new lens, understanding dynamics that had shaped me for decades. The relief was overwhelming, but so was the grief for all the years I'd spent blaming myself for family dysfunction that was never my fault. That evening, I made a decision that would have been unthinkable just a week earlier. I was going to take control of the narrative, instead of letting my parents manage the family's perception of events. Marcus helped me create a timeline of everything I could remember. The mysterious breakup with Kevin, the lost job opportunity, family gatherings where my achievements were downplayed, times when personal information I'd shared with Candace somehow made its way back to me as family criticism. The pattern was undeniable once I laid it all out. I spent Sunday morning writing the most difficult email of my life. It was addressed to our entire extended family, and it was going to change everything. Dear family, I began. I want to share with you what really happened regarding Candace's wedding, because the story you may have heard is not complete. I detailed the text about watching online, the confrontation with Candace, and my decision to decline participation entirely. I explained the years of favoritism I'd experienced and normalized, and how Saturday's revelations had helped me understand that this wasn't normal family dysfunction. It was systematic mistreatment. Jessica shared with me that during the rehearsal dinner, Candace revealed she has been actively sabotaging my personal and professional life for years. I've attached documentation of the specific incidents I can prove, including the interference with my job application and the lies told to my former boyfriend. I included screenshots of the Hartwell and Associates rejection email, my college photos with Kevin, and the timeline of our sudden breakup, and copies of text messages where Candace had asked seemingly innocent questions about my life that later became ammunition for family criticism. I'm sharing this not for sympathy, but for clarity. I've spent years wondering why I felt disconnected from our family, why my achievements seemed to matter less than my sister's struggles, why I couldn't seem to maintain the family relationships I wanted. Now I understand that I was trying to build relationships with people who were getting false information about me and my motivations. The hardest part was the ending. I will be stepping back from family relationships indefinitely while I process this information and decide how to move forward. I bear no ill will toward anyone, but I can no longer participate in dynamics that require me to diminish myself or accept treatment that would be unacceptable from strangers. Before sending it, I called Uncle Jim to give him a heads up. You're about to blow up the family group chat, kiddo. Good. It's been built on lies anyway. Are you prepared for the fallout? I'm prepared for the truth. Whatever comes after that, I can handle. I hit send at noon on Sunday. My phone stayed silent for exactly 14 minutes. Then, all Hell broke loose. Dad called first, his voice shaking with rage. How dare you air our family's private business to everyone? It stopped being private when my life was being affected by information I didn't have. You're going to destroy this family over your hurt feelings. I'm not destroying anything. I'm just refusing to participate in covering up what's already been destroyed. Mom called next, sobbing. Beulah, please, can't we work this out privately? You're humiliating your sister when she's already going through the worst time of her life. The worst time of her life is a consequence of her own choices. She made a mistake. She was drinking and said things she didn't mean. She meant them enough to act on them for years. But not everyone reacted with anger. Cousin Sarah called to thank me for finally speaking up. I felt crazy for years thinking something was off about how you were treated. Now I understand why you always seemed so guarded at family events. Tyler called that evening, his voice heavy with remorse. Beulah, I owe you the biggest apology. I wanted to invite you from the beginning, but Candace convinced me you disapproved of our relationship. I actually worried that I wasn't good enough for your family's standards. You seem like a good man, Tyler. I'm sorry you got caught up in this. I'm the one who's sorry. If I'd questioned her story instead of just accepting it, maybe I could have prevented years of this behavior. You're not responsible for her choices. No, but I enabled them by not asking harder questions. I hope someday I can make it up to you. Uncle Jim called to update me on the family reaction. Your Aunt Patricia is horrified. She's been going through her own memories and realizing how many times Candace fed her negative information about you that influenced how she treated you. What about Grandma Helen? Your grandmother called me crying. She said she's been complicit in this for too long and wants to make amends. And my parents? Your father is furious because his carefully managed family image just imploded. Your mother is in denial, claiming Candace was just drunk and didn't mean any of it. What about Candace? Radio silence. I think she's finally realized the scope of what she's done. That week, I received responses from family members I hadn't spoken to in years. Some were supportive, others were defensive of my parents, but everyone was finally talking about dynamics that had been ignored for decades. The most meaningful response came from Grandma Helen, who asked if she could come visit me in person. She arrived Friday evening with tears in her eyes and a lifetime of regret. Beulah, I owe you an apology that's about 20 years overdue. Grandma, you don't need to. Yes, I do. I watched your parents favor your sister, and I told myself it wasn't my place to interfere. But silence made me complicit in your mistreatment. We talked for 3 hours about family patterns, about how dysfunction gets normalized when no one speaks up, about how love sometimes requires difficult confrontations. What your sister did to you was unforgivable, she said finally. But what your parents did was worse, because they were supposed to protect you. I just want to understand why. Because admitting they raised a child who could do these things would mean admitting they failed as parents. It's easier to blame you for being difficult than to confront their own mistakes. For the first time in my adult life, I felt seen and understood by my family. Not all of them, but enough of them to know that the problem had never been me. 3 weeks after the wedding disaster, Candace appeared at my apartment unannounced. I saw her through the peephole, standing in the hallway looking smaller and more fragile than I'd ever seen her. Against my better judgment, I opened the door. Can we talk? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know what there is to say. Please, Beulah. I need to explain. I let her in, but I didn't invite her to sit down. She stood in my living room looking around at the life she'd tried so hard to undermine. Tyler left me, she said finally. I heard. He won't return my calls. He won't see me. He moved out of our apartment and blocked me on everything. I waited for the apology that was surely coming, the tears and the promises to change. This is all your fault, she said instead. I stared at her, genuinely stunned by the audacity. Excuse me? If you hadn't sent that email to everyone, Tyler never would have known about the rehearsal dinner. We could have worked through this privately. Candace, Tyler called off the wedding because of what you did, not because of my email. But he only knew about it because you made a big scene, and there it was. Even faced with the complete destruction of her life because of her own choices, she was still trying to make me the villain. I made a big scene by protecting myself from your lies. You could have just talked to me. We could have worked it out. The way we worked out all the other times you sabotaged my life? Which times were those exactly? She had no answer for that because there had been no other confrontations. I'd spent years accepting mistreatment without even knowing its source. I was trying to protect myself, she said finally, tears starting to flow. From what? From being compared to you. Do you know what it's like being your sister? Perfect grades, perfect career, perfect boyfriend, perfect life. Everyone always held you up as the example I should follow. When? When did anyone ever do that? All the time. Uncle Jim always talked about how proud he was of your achievements. Grandma Helen always mentioned your career success. Even Tyler's parents asked about your job at the engagement party. That's called normal conversation, Candace. People ask about family members' lives. It was constant comparison. And I was always coming up short. I realized then that she'd been fighting a war I didn't even know existed, defending against threats that lived only in her imagination. So you decided to level the playing field by destroying my opportunities? I decided to protect my own happiness. And it worked until you ruined everything. There was no remorse, no recognition that she'd hurt me, no acknowledgement that her behavior was wrong. She was still the victim in her own story. Candace, I want you to leave now. You can't just cut me out of your life. I'm your sister. You stopped being my sister the first time you chose to hurt me instead of dealing with your own insecurities. Mom and Dad will never forgive you for this. That's their choice to make. After she left, I felt strangely peaceful. The sister I'd been trying to love and protect didn't actually exist. She was a creation of my own hope and denial, built on memories of a childhood that had apparently been very different for her than it was for me. Tyler called that evening with updates that shouldn't have surprised me, but still did. She's been contacting my friends and family, trying to convince them that you manipulated me into calling off the wedding. I've never even met you. I know. But she's telling people you've been jealous of her happiness for years and finally found a way to destroy it. The lies continued, even when there was nothing left to gain from them. Tyler, I need to ask you something. During your relationship with her, did she ever seem threatened by me specifically? All the time. She brought you up constantly, usually to mention how you didn't approve of something or how you thought you were better than everyone else. I realize now she was testing me, seeing if I'd choose loyalty to her over fairness to you. What would have happened if you'd defended me? I think she would have found a reason to end things. She needed me to be complicit in excluding you. Or I wasn't really on her side. More revelations emerged as time passed. Jessica called to tell me that other bridesmaids were sharing stories of times Candace had pumped them for information about me, or made subtle comments designed to damage my reputation. Tyler's mother admitted she'd been confused by my absence from family events because Tyler's father always spoke highly of me when he encountered me at business functions. The most painful revelation came from Aunt Patricia, who called to apologize for years of treating me differently based on information Candace had fed her. She told me you thought you were too good for family gatherings, that you only showed up out of obligation and spent the whole time judging everyone else. I was quiet at family gatherings because I felt unwelcome, and we treated you as unwelcome because we thought you didn't want to be there. It was a horrible cycle, and your sister orchestrated all of it. Dad finally called 6 weeks after the wedding, his voice different than I'd ever heard it. Beulah, we need to talk. Do we? Yes. Your mother and I have been in counseling, and our therapist says we owe you some conversations. What kind of conversations? About how we failed you as parents. I wasn't sure I was ready for that conversation, but I agreed to meet them for lunch the following weekend. They looked older, smaller somehow, sitting across from me in the restaurant where we'd celebrated my high school graduation. Mom's eyes were red from crying, and Dad couldn't seem to make eye contact. We didn't know about the sabotage, Mom said immediately. We never knew Candace was actively hurting you, but you knew you were treating us differently. Dad nodded slowly. We told ourselves it was because you were more independent, more capable of handling things on your own. That was our excuse for being lazy parents, Mom added. You never demanded attention the way Candace did, so we gave her the attention and told ourselves you preferred it that way. Did you prefer it that way? Dad asked. Of course not. I was a child. I wanted my parents to be proud of me and interested in my life. We were proud, Mom said quickly. You never showed it. We assumed you knew. How would I know if you never said anything? The conversation went on for 2 hours, circling around decades of dysfunction and missed opportunities. They were genuinely remorseful, but they were also defensive, still trying to minimize their role in the family dynamics that had enabled Candace's behavior. What do you want from us going forward? Dad asked finally. I want you to stop making excuses for her. I want you to acknowledge that this wasn't a drunken mistake or a misunderstanding. Candace systematically tried to destroy my life for years, and you created the family environment that made it possible. That seems harsh, Mom said. What seems harsh is spending my entire adult life wondering why I felt like an outsider in my own family, only to discover it was because my sister was actively working to make me one. They promised to think about what I'd said, to continue therapy, to try to rebuild our relationship on more honest ground. But I could tell they still didn't fully grasp the scope of the damage that had been done. The most satisfying consequence came 3 months later, when Uncle Jim called with news about Candace's life post-wedding. She's been blacklisted by most of the wedding vendors in town after she tried to sue them for not preventing Tyler from calling off the wedding. She's claiming the venue should have stopped him from speaking during the ceremony. That's insane. It gets worse. She's been posting on social media about how Tyler and you conspired to ruin her wedding, and Tyler's lawyer sent her a cease and desist letter. What about work? She got fired from the gallery. Apparently, she was using her position to spread rumors about competing artists, and when her reputation for dishonesty became public, they couldn't keep her on. And Mom and Dad? Still supporting her financially, but their friends are asking uncomfortable questions about the family dynamics. Your father's business associates have heard the whole story, and it's affecting how people see his judgment. I should have felt vindicated, but instead I felt sad. Candace had destroyed her own life, pursuing a war against me that existed only in her mind. Everyone had lost Tyler, my parents, even Candace herself. The only difference was that I was finally free to stop participating in the destruction. 6 months after the wedding that never happened, my life looked completely different. Not because anything external had changed dramatically, but because I was finally living authentically instead of constantly managing other people's emotions and expectations. Marcus and I bought the house we'd been dreaming about, a charming Victorian with a garden where I could finally plant the flowers I'd always wanted. We hosted dinner parties for friends who actually wanted to be there, who asked about my work because they were genuinely interested, who celebrated my successes without keeping score. The most surprising change was in my career. Without the constant emotional drain of family drama, I had energy to take on new challenges. I started mentoring young paralegals and discovered a passion for teaching that led to speaking engagements at legal conferences. When you're not spending all your time defending your right to exist, you have remarkable reserves of creativity and ambition. Uncle Jim became a regular visitor, bringing Grandma Helen for monthly dinners where we talked about everything and nothing. They'd become the family I'd always wanted, people who showed up because they enjoyed my company, not because obligation demanded it. You seem lighter, Grandma Helen observed one evening as we cleaned dishes together, like you've been carrying a weight we couldn't see. I didn't know how heavy it was until I set it down. Do you miss them? Your parents and sister? I miss the idea of them. I miss the family I thought I had, or hoped I could have. But I don't miss the reality of how they treated me. Tyler had become an unexpected friend. He'd asked for my help understanding the red flags he'd missed in his relationship with Candace, and our conversations had evolved into genuine friendship. He was dating someone new now, a teacher named Catherine, who treated him with the respect and honesty he deserved. You saved my life, he'd told me recently. If I'd married her, she would have spent years manipulating me and destroying any relationships that threatened her control. You saved your own life by having the courage to walk away, only because your absence forced me to ask questions I should have been asking all along. My parents and I maintained minimal contact. They sent birthday cards and holiday gifts, and I responded politely but briefly. The counseling had helped them understand some of their mistakes, but they still couldn't fully accept responsibility for the environment they'd created. They wanted forgiveness, without true accountability, reconciliation without real change. It's like they want to go back to the old normal, I explained to Marcus one night. But the old normal was the problem. Do you think you'll ever have a real relationship with them? Maybe. If they ever decide they want to know who I actually am, instead of who they need me to be to make their story work. Candace had made several attempts to contact me, each one revealing her continued inability to take responsibility for her actions. The messages followed a predictable pattern: anger, self-pity, blame, and then attempts at manipulation. She'd tried claiming she was suicidal, that Tyler was abusing her, that I was the reason she couldn't find work. Each message made it clearer that cutting contact had been the right choice. The most healing part of the whole experience was connecting with other people who'd experienced similar family dynamics. I'd started volunteering with a support group for adult children of dysfunctional families, sharing my story and helping others recognize patterns they'd normalized. The hardest part is giving up the hope that they'll change, I told a group one evening. You spend years trying to be good enough, successful enough, understanding enough to finally earn the love and respect that should have been unconditional. How do you know when to stop trying? Asked Maria, a young woman whose golden child brother had been embezzling from their family business while their parents blamed her for being difficult. When you realize that the relationship requires you to be smaller than you are, when you're apologizing for your achievements, hiding your happiness, or accepting treatment that you wouldn't tolerate from a stranger. A year after the wedding debacle, Marcus proposed during a weekend trip to the mountains where we'd hiked on the original wedding day. It was perfect in its simplicity. No drama, no family politics, just two people who'd chosen to build a life together based on mutual respect and genuine love. Are you going to invite your parents to our wedding? He asked later, as we planned our own celebration. I'm going to send them an invitation. What they do with it is their choice. And Candace? Candace gets the same treatment she gave me. She can watch online if she wants. We planned a small ceremony with people who truly wanted to celebrate our happiness. Uncle Jim walked me down the aisle. Grandma Helen cried happy tears in the front row, and Jessica served as my maid of honor, finally getting to support a bride who wanted her there. My parents sent a card wishing us well, but didn't attend. I felt sad, but not surprised. Attending would have required acknowledging that I'd built a beautiful life without their support, and that was still too threatening to their narrative. The wedding was everything Candace's was supposed to be. Joyful, authentic, and filled with people who genuinely loved both the bride and groom. No one had to be excluded for others to feel special. No one had to be diminished for others to shine. 3 months after our wedding, I received an unexpected letter from Candace. It was different from her previous attempts at contact, longer, more thoughtful, and for the first time, it contained what seemed like genuine remorse. I've been in therapy for 6 months, she wrote, and I'm finally starting to understand how sick my behavior was. I spent years hating you for having things I wanted, but I never tried to build those things for myself. Instead, I tried to tear down what you'd built, thinking that would somehow make me feel better about my own failures. She detailed specific instances of sabotage I hadn't even known about times. She'd badmouthed me to mutual acquaintances, professional contacts she'd undermined, social invitations she'd discouraged people from extending to me. I know you probably don't believe me, and I understand why. I've lied so much, and for so long, that the truth feels foreign even to me. But I need you to know that your decision to step away from our family probably saved my life. Losing Tyler, losing my job, losing the respect of our extended family, it was the first time I'd ever faced real consequences for my behavior. The letter went on for pages, alternating between insight and self-pity, progress and backsliding. She was trying to change, but change was hard, and she was still tempted to blame others for the natural consequences of her choices. I don't expect forgiveness, she concluded. I don't deserve it, but I wanted you to know that I finally understand what I took from you, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to become someone worthy of having you as a sister. I read the letter 3 times, looking for manipulation or hidden agendas. It seemed genuine, but I'd been fooled by her sincerity before. More importantly, I realized that it didn't matter whether she'd truly changed or not. My peace no longer depended on her behavior. I wrote back briefly. I hope therapy continues to help you understand yourself better. I wish you well in your journey toward becoming the person you want to be. I'm not ready for contact yet, but I appreciate you taking responsibility for your actions. It felt good to respond with kindness rather than anger, but also to maintain boundaries that protected my peace. 2 years after the wedding disaster that started it all, I ran into Mom at the grocery store. We made polite conversation about Marcus's new promotion and her garden club activities, carefully avoiding any mention of family dynamics or Candace's ongoing struggles. "You look happy," she said as we prepared to part ways. "I am happy. I'm glad." She paused, seeming to want to say something more. "I've been thinking a lot about the conversation we had at the restaurant. About how we failed you." "Mom, no, let me say this. You were right about everything. We created a family where love was conditional, where attention had to be earned through crisis or compliance. We taught Candace that she had to compete with you instead of learning to build her own life. And we taught you that your needs didn't matter as much as keeping peace." It was the most honest thing she'd ever said to me. "Thank you for saying that. I know it's probably too late to fix what we broke, but I want you to know that your father and I talk about our mistakes all the time. We're proud of who you've become. And we're sorry it took us so long to see how we contributed to your pain. It's not too late to change, Mom. It's just too late to go back." We parted with a tentative hug, both of us knowing that this was progress but not reconciliation. Real relationships require more than acknowledgement of past mistakes. They require consistent, changed behavior over time. Now, 3 years later, as I sit in our garden watching Marcus tend to the roses we planted together, I think about the unexpected gift that text message gave me. "Watch your sister's wedding online," it said. And in refusing to do that, I learned to watch my own life instead. I learned that stepping back isn't giving up sometimes. It's the most powerful thing you can do. When you stop participating in dynamics that diminish you, you create space for relationships that celebrate you. I learned that family isn't about blood or obligation. It's about mutual respect, genuine affection, and the choice to show up for each other's joy, as well as sorrow. Most importantly, I learned that you can't fix people who don't want to be fixed, but you can always choose to protect your own peace. Some bridges are meant to be burned, if they only led to places that made you smaller. The wedding I didn't attend became the foundation for the life I actually wanted. Sometimes the best gift is discovering you're strong enough to walk away from anything that doesn't honor who you are. Have you ever had to step away from family relationships to protect your own well-being? It's never easy, but sometimes it's necessary for our own growth and happiness. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you experienced similar family dynamics, and how did you handle them? If this story resonated with you, please consider liking this video and subscribing to hear more stories about finding strength in difficult family situations. And if you think someone else might benefit from hearing about choosing self-respect over family obligation, please share this with them. Thank you for listening to my story, and for being part of a community where we can talk honestly about the complicated realities of family relationships. I wish you all the courage to choose relationships that honor your authentic self, and the wisdom to know when stepping back is actually stepping forward.